Part 1. There are children who grow up, and no one ever realizes. When they stopped crying out for help. There is something very strange that happens in many families. It is not constant fighting. It is not physical punishment. It is not even rebellion. It is silence. A silence so deep that parents believe everything is fine. The child still goes to school, still eats with the family, still says hello, still gets decent grades, still answers when spoken to. From the outside, they seem like a good child. But no one knows that certain doors inside their heart have been closed for a very long time. The saddest part is that the distance between parents and children rarely begins with one major event. It begins with hundreds of tiny moments hence. One day, the child wants to tell a story about school, but the adult says, "Later." One day, the child cries because a friend misunderstood them, but all they hear is, "You're crying over something so small." One day, they excitedly show something they just made, and the only response is, Then the adult goes right back to looking at their phone. Those moments do not break a child's heart all at once, but they are like tiny drops of water falling onto the same rock. On the first day, nothing seems different. On the second day, still nothing. But years later, that rock has been worn away into a deep hollow. Psychologists call this emotional withdrawal. It is when a child is still physically present, but slowly gives up searching for understanding from the people they love the most. The frightening part is that this process happens almost silently. No noise, no warning, no one notices until the distance has become far too great. A psychologist once shared the story of a 12-year-old boy. Throughout his very first therapy session, he barely spoke. He did not resist. He was not angry. He simply sat there, looking down at his hands. After almost 40 minutes of silence, the psychologist asked just one simple question. If there is one thing you wish adults understood, what would it be? The boy thought for a very long time. Then he answered, "I don't need them to solve everything. I just wish they wouldn't make conclusions before I've finished talking." It was a very short sentence, but it was enough to make any parent stop and think. How many times do we listen, only to prepare our answer instead of listening to truly understand? How many times has a child just begun to speak, only for the adult to immediately give advice, offer a lesson, pass judgment, when all the child really needed was someone willing to stay beside them? A child's brain develops very differently from an adult's. The part of the brain responsible for logical thinking and emotional regulation, the prefrontal cortex, is not fully developed until well into the 20s. That means when children cry, become angry, or react intensely, they are not always trying to make life difficult for their parent. Very often, their brains simply have not yet developed the ability to regulate themselves. If an adult responds with anger in that moment, then two brains that are both out of control will collide with each other. No one is truly listening anymore. But if the adult can remain calm, the child's brain gradually learns emotional regulation through the calm presence of their caregiver. Scientists call this process co-regulation. In other words, children learn how to stay calm from someone who knows how to stay calm, not from a lecture about staying calm. There was once a father who shared that he had always believed he was a very responsible parent. He worked hard. He did not drink. He did not gamble. He never neglected his family. He believed that was enough, until one evening his daughter asked him a question. "Dad, do you know what my favorite color is?" He laughed. He guessed pink. Wrong. He guessed blue. Wrong. He guessed yellow. Still wrong. His daughter smiled. "It's okay. I don't know what your favorite food is either." The father said that in that moment, he suddenly realized something. They had lived under the same roof for years, yet they knew so little about each other. He had spent all his time earning money to take care of his daughter, but he had forgotten to spend time truly understanding her. Many parents are living exactly the same way. We know what grade our child is in. We know their height. We know their weight. We know their tutoring schedule. We know their test scores. But we do not know what worries them the most, what they are afraid of, who makes them smile the most at school, or what keeps them awake at night. Information is not connection. Understanding is connection. There is a paradox in parenting. The older children become, the less they need their parents to do things for them. But the more they need their parents to understand them. When they are little, you tie their shoelaces, you prepare breakfast, you take them to school. But once they enter adolescence, what they need is no longer your hands. They need a place, safe enough, to lay down the weight they carry inside. If that place does not exist at home, they will look for it somewhere else. Maybe among friends, maybe on social media, maybe with complete strangers. And sometimes, that very moment determines the direction of an entire youth. But this is only the beginning. Because there is another mistake that many deeply loving parents unknowingly make. A mistake that slowly teaches a child that their worth depends on how well they perform, and that belief quietly follows them all the way into adulthood. Part 2. When love unintentionally becomes pressure, there is a question that very few parents ever dare to ask themselves. If one day your child no longer gets good grades, no longer behaves perfectly, no longer lives up to everything you hoped for, would the way you see them change? Most parents would answer immediate no. I would still love my child, and that is true. But children do not experience love the way parents think they do. They experience love through what their parents repeat every single day. A look, a sigh, the very first question after school, the reaction when they bring home their results. Love does not exist only in a parent's heart. A child must be able to feel it through their own experiences. There was once a 9-year-old boy who loved building strange little inventions. He collected cardboard boxes, bottle caps, popsicle sticks, old wires. To adults, it looked like nothing but junk. But in his imagination, every single piece could become a spaceship, a robot, or a tiny city. One afternoon, he excitedly brought his newest invention to show his father. It was a toy car made from an old cookie tin. The wheels were uneven. The paint was messy. His father looked at it for only a few seconds, then said, "That's nice. But instead of spending time making these things, you should spend more time studying English." The boy nodded. He did not argue. He did not cry. He quietly carried the little car back into his room. Many years later, his father realized that was the last time his son ever showed him something he had created, not because he stopped being creative, but because he had begun to believe, maybe the things I love are not worth anyone's attention. In developmental psychology, there is a very important concept called intrinsic motivation. It is when a child does something because it brings them joy, curiosity, or a sense of meaning, not because of rewards, not because of praise, and not because they are afraid of being punished. Interestingly, children who preserve their intrinsic motivation often become more persistent, more creative, and happier as adults. But intrinsic motivation is incredibly fragile. The moment adults turn everything into an evaluation, children slowly lose sight of the joy they once felt. They begin asking themselves, is this good enough? Will mom and dad be happy? Will they criticize me? Instead of asking, do I actually enjoy doing this? There is another reality that many people never notice. Many children do not grow up afraid of failure. They grow up afraid of disappointing their parents. Those are two completely different things. A child who is not afraid of failure will dare to try, dare to make mistakes, dare to stand back up. But a child who constantly fears disappointing others will choose safety, will choose certainty, or worse, will never begin at all. Because one question keeps echoing inside their mind. What if I don't do it well enough? A researcher once conducted a fascinating experiment. After children completed a test, he divided them into two groups. The first group was praised with, "You are so smart." The second group was praised with, "You worked really hard." At first, both sounded like compliments, but after repeated experiments, the results were dramatically different. The children praised for being smart began avoiding difficult challenges. They worried that they might no longer be seen as intelligent. Meanwhile, the children praised for their effort actively chose harder challenges because in their minds, ability could improve. This is exactly what Professor Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. It is not about talent. It is about believing that people can always become better, and that belief is often built inside the very first home a child ever knows. There are families where every dinner begins with familiar questions. How many points did you get today? Were you at the top of the class? How did that other student do? There is nothing inherently wrong with those questions. But if they are always the first thing parents care about, children unconsciously begin believing achievement is the ticket to receiving attention. Grades become the measure of their worth. When that happens, every success brings relief. Not pride, just relief, because today they did not disappoint anyone, and every failure does not only hurt because of the result, it makes them question their own value. A primary school teacher once shared the story of a very unusual student. Whenever the child got an answer wrong, they never erased it, never corrected it, never asked for help. They simply sat there without moving. When the teacher asked why, the child quietly replied, "If I erase it, you'll know I made a mistake." It sounds innocent, but that is exactly how many children think. They do not see mistakes as part of learning. They see mistakes as proof that they are not good enough. And sadly, that belief rarely begins at school. It usually begins with the familiar reactions they experience at home. Perhaps after a failure, what a child needs most is not another lesson and not another analysis, but the feeling that says, "My parents are still on my side." A child who has just received a poor grade has often already blamed themselves, far more than anyone realizes. If the very first words they hear are, "Why were you so careless? I warned you already. You've disappointed us," then the pain will no longer come only from the test. It will come from feeling that they have lost the acceptance of the people they love the most. Instead, try beginning with a different question. You must feel really disappointed today. Just one sentence. That is all. Yet it sends a completely different message. The result may not have been good, but our relationship is still safe, and it is inside that feeling of safety that children become calm enough to learn from their mistakes, not because they are afraid, but because they genuinely want to grow. However, there is something even quieter than the pressure to achieve. It happens when parents try to fix every negative emotion as quickly as possible. They believe they are helping, but many times that very effort gradually teaches a child that sadness is wrong, that crying is weakness, that anger is something shameful. And from that moment, another battle begins, not between parent and child, but between the child and their own emotions. Part 3. The greatest danger is not negative emotions. It is when a child no longer dares to express them. There is a very common misunderstanding in parenting. Many people believe that a good child is a child who rarely cries, rarely argues, rarely gets angry, rarely shows emotion. But in many cases, that is not maturity. It is suppression. There are children, only 6 or 7 years old, who have already learned how to swallow their tears, not because they are strong, but because they know every time they cry, the adults become irritated. Every time they are sad, someone says, "There's nothing to cry about. Be strong. You're a big kid now. Stop crying." At first, those words sound perfectly normal. Many people even believe they are helping children become tougher. But neuroscience tells us something completely different. An emotion that is not acknowledged does not simply disappear. It only finds another place to live. It may become anxiety. It may become sudden bursts of anger. It may become low self-esteem that lasts well into adulthood. A psychologist once told the story of a young woman who always found herself difficult to understand. She almost never cried, never complained. Her friends all described her as calm. But whenever something small happened, she would explode. After months of therapy, she finally remembered. A childhood memory. Whenever she cried, because she was hurt or bullied, her father would always say, "Strong girls don't cry." At first, she forced herself to stop crying. Over time, she could no longer tell whether she was sad or angry. She only knew how to endure. Until one day, all those emotions became too much and burst out all at once. That shows us something important. Children do not learn emotional regulation by suppressing emotions. They learn it by being accompanied through their emotions. Imagine this. You have just had an absolutely terrible day. You tell the person you trust the most. But they immediately say, "Don't overthink it. It's not a big deal. It's nothing." Would you actually feel better? Or would you think, maybe I shouldn't share anything anymore? Children are exactly the same. The first thing they are searching for is not a solution, it is understanding. There is a very important principle in psychology called name it to tame it. It means when an emotion is named accurately, its intensity begins to decrease. For example, a child has just had a favorite toy taken away by another child. They begin crying loudly. Instead of saying, "Be quiet, stop crying," you could simply say, "You're really upset because your friend took the toy you love, aren't you?" Just one sentence, that is enough. The child immediately feels, someone understands what I am going through. And that feeling of being understood helps the brain gradually calm itself. One mother once shared an experience that completely changed her. Her 5-year-old son was terrified of the dark. Every night he ran into his parents' bedroom. At first, she believed he was simply being spoiled. She constantly said, "There's nothing to be afraid of. You're a boy. You need to be brave," but nothing improved. Until one day, a specialist suggested she try responding differently. That night, when her son came running into her room, she did not explain. She did not dismiss his fear. She simply hugged him and said, "I know you're feeling really scared right now. Stay with mommy for a little while." Just a few weeks later, the little boy started returning to his own room much sooner. Not because the fear disappeared overnight, but because, for the first time, he no longer had to face that fear alone. This reflects one of the deepest human needs. When we are hurting, we do not need someone to immediately fix everything. We need someone to stay beside us. That is also the foundation of attachment theory developed by John Bowlby. A securely attached child is not someone who grows up without difficulties. It is someone who knows, whenever life becomes difficult, there will always be someone ready to welcome them back. That presence is like an anchor. It gives children the courage to explore the world because they know there is always a safe place to return to. Sadly, many parents unknowingly turn emotions into arguments. The child says, "I hate school." The parent replies, "Your school is wonderful. What are you complaining about?" The child says, "I'm sad." The parent says, "What do you have to be sad about?" The child says, "I'm scared." The parent replies, "What is there to be afraid of?" In conversations like these, adults are arguing against emotions. But emotions are neither right nor wrong. They simply exist. You may not agree with your child's behavior, but begin by acknowledging their feelings. For example, "I understand that you're really angry, but let's find another way instead of hitting your little brother." In that moment, you are maintaining healthy boundaries without denying your child's inner world. Interestingly, children who are allowed to name their emotions often develop stronger empathy because they become familiar with recognizing what is happening inside themselves. And when people understand themselves, they also become better at understanding others. That is why families who regularly talk about emotions do not simply raise calmer children. They also raise adults who know how to listen, who know how to apologize, who know how to put themselves in someone else's shoes. Qualities that no school can fully teach. Yet there is still another reason why conversations between parents and children gradually become shorter. It is not because there is no time. It is because adults often focus only on the behavior, while missing the most important thing hidden behind that behavior. Part 4. Behind every difficult behavior is a story the child does not yet know how to tell. There is a famous saying in child psychology: every behavior is a form of communication. It sounds simple, but if we truly understand it, the way we see our children will completely change. Because many parents spend all their energy trying to fix the behavior, while what the child is really trying to say is hidden behind that behavior. There was an 8-year-old boy who constantly disrupted the classroom. He interrupted others. He ran around. He could never sit still. Almost every week his teacher called home. His family believed he was simply too naughty. His teachers believed he lacked discipline. Until one day, a child psychologist met with him alone. The very first question she asked was not, "Why are you so disruptive?" Instead, she asked, "What is the happiest moment of your day?" The boy remained silent. After a long pause, he quietly answered, "When my teacher calls my name." That one sentence changed everyone's perspective. He was not trying to ruin the class. He was simply searching for attention. Because at home, both of his parents worked late every night. Almost every day, the only time adults truly looked at him was when he had done something wrong. A child who lacks connection will find every possible way to be seen, even if it means using negative behavior. For young children, negative attention still feels better than feeling invisible. Perhaps this is what surprises so many people. Many behaviors that adults call bad behavior are actually signals. A stubborn child may simply be trying to regain a sense of control. A child who gets angry easily may be overwhelmed by emotions they have never been helped to process. A child who refuses to study may be so afraid of failure that they cannot bring themselves to begin. A child who lies repeatedly is not always trying to deceive others. Sometimes they are simply terrified of what will happen if they tell the truth. If we only look at the surface, parents will spend their lives managing one behavior after another. But if we look deeper, we can begin healing the real cause. In medicine, when someone has a fever, doctors do not simply try to lower the temperature. They search for what caused the fever. Parenting is the same. A tantrum, an act of defiance, an angry outburst. These are usually symptoms, not the root cause. Yet many families spend almost all of their energy treating the symptoms, yelling, punishing, threatening, taking things away, while never asking the most important question of all: what is happening inside my child? Neuroscientists have discovered that when human beings experience prolonged stress, the brain shifts into survival mode. When that happens, logical thinking decreases, memory becomes weaker, the ability to cooperate also declines. This is true, even for adults. How much more so for children? That is why, when a child has just been scolded, is crying, is frightened, that is not the best moment to teach a life lesson. At that moment, their brain is almost incapable of taking anything in. The first thing they need is to feel safe again. Only after that can learning truly begin. One mother shared that her 7-year-old daughter always came home from school in a terrible mood. Every day she threw down her backpack, slammed her bedroom door, answered everyone with short, cold replies. At first, the mother became furious. She believed her daughter was being disrespectful. Until one day, she took time off work to pick her daughter up from school. For the first time, she saw everything herself. All afternoon, her daughter had been studying nonstop, doing homework, attending clubs, going to extra classes, then sitting in heavy traffic on the way home. By the time she walked through the front door, it was the only moment all day when she no longer had to keep trying. The safest place became the place where all the emotions she had been holding inside could finally be released. That did not mean she wanted to hurt her mother. It meant she believed home was the one place where she could truly be herself. From that day on, instead of asking, "Why are you being so difficult today?" her mother began asking, "You must be really tired today, aren't you?" Just one small change, and the atmosphere inside their home began to change. There is another beautiful concept in psychology. It is called the invisible backpack. Every morning, every child carries a backpack, but inside there are no books, there are emotions. Some days, the backpack is light. The child is cheerful, excited, easy to cooperate with. But on other days, the backpack is overflowing. A hurtful comment at school, a disappointing test, a friend who turned away, a teacher's criticism, an argument with a sibling. Adults cannot see that invisible backpack. So it becomes very easy to conclude, why are you being so difficult today? When the truth is, the child is simply trying to carry a weight they do not even know how to describe. Perhaps the saddest thing in many families is that parents only see the final version of an emotion. They see the anger, they hear the shouting, they witness the defiance, but they never see the dozens of tiny emotions that built up beforehand. It is like blowing air into a balloon. Every disappointment adds a little more. Every misunderstanding adds a little more. Every lonely moment adds a little more. The balloon keeps growing until one tiny event becomes enough to make it explode. Adults see the explosion. The child has lived through the entire process of filling the balloon. That is the difference. So perhaps one of the greatest gifts parents can give their children is not solving every problem. It is helping them recognize what is happening inside themselves. Instead of asking, "Were you good today?" try asking, "What made you smile the most today? What made today feel difficult? Was there any moment today when you wish you had done something differently?" Questions like these do more than begin a conversation. They teach children how to observe their own inner world, and that is a skill they will carry for the rest of their lives. But even after parents learn to understand their children's emotions, to truly listen, to see beyond behavior, there is still one thing powerful enough to change an entire family. It is not a complicated parenting method. It is not an expensive course. It is the small rituals of connection, repeated every single day. Those ordinary moments that seem so insignificant may ultimately determine whether a child grows up feeling alone or grows up believing they will always have a place to come home to. Part 5. The small things you do today will become your child's inner voice for the rest of their life. There is one question that very few parents have ever stopped to consider. 30 years from now, when your child looks back on their childhood, what will be the very first memory that comes to mind? Will it be a big house or a small one, an expensive toy or family vacations? Perhaps all of those things will be remembered. But research on emotional memory shows us something even more remarkable. People rarely remember the details of an event. What we remember is how that event made us feel. A child may forget what they ate when they were 8 years old, but they may remember forever how it felt when their father hugged them after their very first failure. A little girl may no longer remember the birthday gift she received at the age of 10, but she may still remember the gentle look in her mother's eyes when she admitted she had made a mistake. Because in the end, what shapes a childhood is not the major events. It is the emotional atmosphere, repeated day after day. There was once a family who participated in a long-term research study. What surprised the researchers was that this family did not have any extraordinary parenting method. They did not give extravagant rewards. They were not overly strict. They did not follow any famous parenting model. Yet their children grew into remarkably resilient adults. After years of observation, the researchers discovered one tiny thing they all had in common. Every night before bed, no matter how busy they were, the entire family spent about 10 minutes sharing one happy moment and one difficult moment from their day. No one interrupted. No one corrected anyone. No one rushed to give advice. They simply listened. Those 10 minutes did not solve every problem, but they sent an incredibly powerful message to every child. Your feelings always have a place in this family. That was the difference. Many people believe building a close relationship with your child requires doing something extraordinary. In reality, connection is usually built through very small rituals. A hug before school, a genuine question when picking them up, a family meal without phones, a simple good night looking into your child's eyes while they are telling you a story. These things may seem completely ordinary, but their repetition creates a deep sense of safety, just as a tree does not grow because of one heavy rainstorm. It grows because of countless small rains falling year after year. Love within a family works the same way. It is not proven by one grand gesture. It is built through thousands of tiny moments that adults often believe do not matter. One father once asked a parenting expert, "I missed so much of my child's early years. My son is 14 now. Is it too late?" The expert smiled, then asked him if a tree hasn't been watered for years, and today you finally begin caring for it, would that be meaningless? The father shook his head. "Of course not. As long as it is still alive," the expert replied. "Children are exactly the same. No one has a perfect childhood. No father, no mother has gone through parenting without ever losing their temper. What truly matters is not whether you have made mistakes. It is, after realizing them, whether you have the courage to come back. There is something beautiful that many parents do not know. Research on attachment has found that strong relationships are not built because there are never any breaks. They are built because people know how to repair those breaks. That means you may lose your temper. You may react badly. You may have days when you are completely exhausted. But if afterward you walk into your child's room, sit down, look into their eyes, and say, "I'm sorry, today I let my anger become bigger than my love," then that very moment you are teaching your child a lesson that no school could ever replace, that people can make mistakes, but they can also repair them. That love does not mean always being right. It means always being willing to reconnect. There is one more thing that matters deeply. Do not try to become a perfect parent. Your child does not need that. What they need is a real person, someone who laughs, someone who cries, someone who admits mistakes, someone who keeps learning, someone who can say, "I'm still learning how to be a father. I'm still learning how to be a mother. I have hard days too." When parents allow themselves to simply be human, their children learn something priceless. They learn that they do not have to be perfect in order to deserve love. That is one of the greatest gifts you can ever give to your child's self-worth. Perhaps the greatest inheritance parents leave behind is not a house, not money, not achievements. It is the voice that lives inside their child's mind long after the parents are gone. One day, your child will grow up. They may study in another city. They may build a family of their own. They may face the first great failures of their life. In those moments, you will not always be there to hold their hand. But one thing will always remain: the voice they carried with them from childhood. If that voice says, "It's okay, I can try again, I still have value, even when I am not perfect, I deserve to be loved," then no matter how difficult life becomes, they will always have a peaceful place to return to inside themselves. But if that voice always says, "I'm not good enough, I've disappointed everyone again, I have to be perfect," then no matter how successful they become, they may still struggle to ever feel truly happy. There is one message I want to leave with every parent. Every time you choose calm instead of anger, you are not simply handling one difficult situation. You are teaching your child how to face conflict. Every time you choose to listen instead of interrupting, you are not simply listening to a story. You are telling your child that their voice matters. Every time you hug your child after they make a mistake, you are not approving of the mistake. You are separating their behavior from their worth as a human being. Your child can make mistakes, but your child is not a bad child. That distinction will stay with them for the rest of their life. One day, your child will no longer hold your hand to cross the street, will no longer run to the door when you come home from work, will no longer call for you in the middle of the night after a nightmare. Childhood always ends sooner than we think. So if today your child still wants to tell you a story, listen. If today your child still wants to hug you, hug them back. If today your child still believes that you are the safest place in the world, please protect that belief. Because there are many things in life that can be replaced after they are lost. But no one can ever buy back a child's childhood, and no one can ever go back to love their child with a gentler version of themselves. So, do not wait until your child becomes an adult to hope for a close relationship. That relationship is built today. From tonight's conversation, from one hug before bedtime, from the look you give your child when they are trying their best. Your child may forget many of the things you taught them, but they will never forget how deeply they felt love. And perhaps many years from now, someone will ask them, "What makes you feel that you have always been worthy?" And they shall smile as they remember a home, a place where they were not loved because they were perfect, but because they were simply themselves. Perhaps that is the greatest success any father or mother could ever achieve.